opposed up until this point to Kevin McCarthy as Speaker of the House. And we are going to now take a quick break, but we're going to have more for you on this at the top of the hour. Stay with us. You're streaming CBS News Primetime.
You ready?
A generation of kids opens up on CBS Reports.
I just want to be like a regular kid.
Their world, their struggles, their voices.
What if I was white?
A lot of people like to call names and make you feel ashamed for being proud of who you are.
Now streaming the internet.
Technology is baked into the DNA of our generation.
Social media, apps, and games.
I like my iPad, my phone, my Nintendo.
Instagram, TikTok, Twitter, it's one click away.
Is growing up digital a blessing or a curse?
There is so much pressure to be perfect.
We need to have conversations regarding healthier usage.
Are the kids all right? The internet, now streaming on the free CBS News app. An original CBS Reports documentary.
This place is at the very tip of the spear when it comes to Satanism and witchcraft and demonism.
Has the church been this divided?
Not in my lifetime. They've been radicalized in their approach to politics.
United in Christ, divided by politics.
We have what I call a cowardly pastor problem because they don't want to get involved in the political situation.
Conservative Christianity and Republicanism have grasped hands in a way that's very unhealthy.
There are churches whose members have divided over partisan politics.
How an evangelical civil war could change the spirit of America.
This was a heavily Christian-influenced attack.
When we have the ability to say that God is on our side, it allows us to justify all kinds of cruelty.
An original CBS Reports documentary, streaming now.
We are so excited, we just can't hide it.
Let's do it! Let's go!
Drew Barrymore.
Hi, guys.
Ms. Lopez and Mr. Maluma are Reggie. What your name is?
Kristen Bell, baby.
It's the Fonz. Wow.
His name is Henry.
I know.
It's all right.
One question. How often do you consume cannabis?
Full frontal male.
What did Tony say?
That's why I love live TV.
CBS mornings are, well, everything your morning should be.
Is this a date or we just friends?
Here we are, your favorite morning people.
CBS mornings, starting at 7.
The news doesn't have to always be depressing.
What do you love about running?
It can be uplifting. That human connection that we create on the broadcast every night is incredibly important.
Everybody wakes up in the morning and they are pelted with alerts that frighten them, news that agitates them. With this show, we have the time to explain what's going on. Here's a deeper understanding of what's happening.
Primetime with John Dickerson. Stream on the free CBS News app.
When weather turns extreme,
States from the plains to the northeast are bracing for more than 2 feet of heavy snow.
every second counts.
This is a monster winter storm.
CBS News and the Weather Channel bring you virtual weather technology so advanced, so real.
There's a wrinkle in the forecast, the accumulating ice.
You'll have time to get prepared.
Take precautions before you head out.
Feel the forecast on the CBS Evening News with Nora O'Donnell.
Hello, I'm Elaine Quijano in for John Dickerson. Welcome to CBS News Prime Time. Republican Congressman Kevin McCarthy has failed to gain enough votes to become Speaker of the House for the 11th time. Now, just like the last 10 votes, Democrat Hakeem Jeffries has 212 votes. That is the entirety of the Democratic caucus. McCarthy has 200 votes. The majority of the GOP has continuously failed to get a faction of about 20 Republicans to support him. You recall the number that Kevin McCarthy needs is 218. Let's go to our CBS News congressional correspondent, Nicole Killian. who is on Capitol Hill and has been talking to lawmakers. Nicole, what's the very latest that you're hearing?
Well, the latest is that the members are now voting to adjourn. This kind of is what happened last night. And again, this is just to provide some more time to kind of iron out any kind of issues, as we know that negotiators have been meeting pretty much all day with some of these GOP holdouts. And increasingly tonight, we have heard about the prospects of a potential deal, although still working to learn more of the details of what that might contain. Some of these holdout members believe that, there is a lot of progress being made and there's some good work happening, but there's still more that needs to be done. Others more optimistic, saying they're just about there. So that is kind of the state of play. And so given that, I think the hope is that if they can take a break tonight, kind of iron out those final details, that hopefully they can return tomorrow and have a more productive day.
So these holdouts are conservative members known as the House Freedom Caucus, Nicole. Regardless of what happens here in the next couple of hours, what are the broader implications of the influence and the power of the House Freedom Caucus here moving forward within the Republican Party?
Well, I think it remains to be seen, and I think we have to see kind of ultimately if this gets resolved and how it gets resolved. Look, as we've been saying for months now, Leader McCarthy, if he does ultimately win the speakership, has a very small margin to play with. And so that really is why you are seeing this process play out so much in the open. One member told me a couple of days ago, and this was one of those holdout members who said, he felt that Kevin McCarthy thought that the majority was going to be bigger and that he wasn't going to need some members of this Freedom Caucus. But as we know, that red wave didn't really materialize. And so now it has really narrowed his margins, narrowed his options in terms of, who he can wheel and deal with. And so I think that is the question going forward, if ultimately he is successful, is how he does navigate this very fine line that he has to walk when it comes to actual legislation and getting things done. Some members that were part of this holdout group, for instance, wanted to see McCarthy agree to shutting down the government over the issue of the debt limit, to make that a condition. Really, in the view of some, just kind of some extreme demands. So as we move on to more complicated issues, although certainly voting for a speaker is a very significant and complex issue in and of itself, as we're learning. Those more complex pieces of legislation, whether to raise the debt limit or, dealing with a spending package or dealing with issues like immigration, where there are very firm opinions on all sides of this Republican conference, not to mention the Democratic positions. There is a lot that Kevin McCarthy will have to navigate, again, if he ultimately assumes this leadership role. So it does raise questions about how the House will work if we're going to continue to have these stops and starts every time there is a major issue or impasse or disagreement over a major piece of legislation, or if this is something that they can get past quickly and move forward and get on with the people's work.
Nicole, for people who are coming to this and maybe haven't been sort of in the weeds on some of this, is this about policy? Is this about sort of personality? Is it both? Can you sort of break down precisely what it is that this group of Republican holdouts has stated that they are unhappy with when it comes to Kevin McCarthy?
Well, it kind of is all of the above. Some of it is personality issues and trust issues with Kevin McCarthy, who, of course, is a veteran of, at least 14 years. And so some feel that he has closely aligned himself more so with the Democrats, or kind of the more centrist part of the party, that he's been more moderate and really hasn't been as bold and transformational as other conservatives. So some of it is just a difference in ideology and in and tactics. And then, you know, a lot of this does have to do, to a certain extent, with rules and process and how work is done in the House of Representatives. You know, part of this rules package that was released earlier this week was based in part on some of the demands of this holdout group of conservative members. For instance, lowering the threshold that is needed for a member to potentially oust the speaker. You know, this week with this new rules package, it started at a threshold of 5 lawmakers that were needed to try to remove a speaker. Now that threshold, potentially based on some of the newer concessions that Leader McCarthy is making, is down to 1, where any single member can force a motion or a vote to try to oust the speaker. So a lot of this is really in terms of some of these minority members trying to have more of a say-so in the process. And so that has been a lot of the discussions that are happening behind closed doors in terms of how many of these members should be allowed on powerful committees like the Rules Committee, which vets just about every piece of legislation that goes through the House. You know, others kind of are seeking ideal or plum committee assignments. So there is a lot at play here. You know, there's also other issues of, you know, some people want legislation that would term limit members of Congress. So that's another issue, or gripe that some of these holdouts have, and so they want some type of commitment to that. There are others who want to see a more aggressive action when it comes to the border. So there are a lot of different things that people want. And so that is why it's taking a lot of time to work through this. And some of these holdout members have said, look, we have put our ideas to Leader McCarthy. We did this months ago. And he's just now starting to have those discussions and just now starting to negotiate with us, starting with that rules package earlier this week. So that is why we are seeing in part this process play out so slowly over the past week.
All right. So, Nicole, the stalemate means that House members are not sworn in. There's not this functioning sort of House of Representatives. What are the potential implications of that?
Well, it is having an impact, and, you know, while people who live outside of, you know, the Washington bubble and the Beltway may not necessarily feel that or see that, one measurable impact is certainly with these new members of Congress who have been elected because they can't be sworn in. They can't do anything for their constituents and the people that they're supposed to serve. So if you call up your member of Congress, your newly elected member, they can't do anything for you. So that's one serious implication. There was also a warning that went out about congressional staffer pay, specifically with regards to staffers who work on committees. And there was some guidance that was sent out recently that if a speaker is not elected by the end of next week and a rules package is adopted, they're not going to be able to process payroll. So there are some very tangible effects. It's almost like another version of a government shutdown, but just more concentrated here in the House.
All right, Nicole Killian on Capitol Hill for us. Nicole, thank you so much. We really appreciate you. I see people running behind you. Much activity, and the night feels young still. All right, Nicole, thank you. The House has adjourned after again failing to elect a speaker. It went to an 11th vote Thursday night for the first time since 1860. Kevin McCarthy still does not have the support needed from the Republican caucus to take the speakership. About 20 in the GOP are still holding out. CBS News congressional correspondent Scott McFarland joins me now on the phone. So, Scott, as we were talking to Nicole just a moment ago, the House adjourned. Tell us what you know. You've been speaking with lawmakers all day.
Yeah, everything's relative, Elaine, but an adjournment vote is, well, it's a partial victory for Kevin McCarthy. It's a vote that he's won. It's just not the vote that he's won. They want more time to bring more of these negotiations behind the scenes, and that's, in a sense, progress for McCarthy because negotiations have made enough progress. They want to continue them. But the trajectory here is less than clear to me because based on the members with whom I'm speaking, there seems to be just this subset of the faction of members of this 20-person defector group that, come hell or high water, seems disinterested and unwilling to vote for Kevin McCarthy, no matter concessions, no matter the deals that are made. They've been forceful and unequivocal, increasingly so in their comments to us and on the House floor. Think about Matt Gaetz of Florida, Matt Rosendale of Montana, Lauren Boebert, to a degree, increasingly, from Colorado, Bob Good from Virginia, and Andy Biggs of Arizona. Those are names that are not familiar household names. But those names didn't give any sense in the past 72 hours that they're going to bend on a procedural or process negotiation, that their complaints or their concerns are much deeper, almost down to the marrow. They're not at skin level.
Yeah, I wonder, Scott, if you can elaborate a bit more on that, because we're trying to put this in some perspective for Americans who, as I was talking to Nicole a moment ago, are busy with the day-to-day routine of their lives and maybe haven't been in the weeds on some of these talks and some of the sticking points expressed by these Republican holdouts. What is it about Kevin McCarthy that some of these 20 Republicans so vehemently oppose, to the point that now we are looking at a 12th round of voting?
So that's the complication here. This group of 20 has a whole myriad of concerns. They don't speak with one singular voice, and their concerns are not synchronized. So Kevin McCarthy doesn't have a silver bullet way of getting 16 of 20 back in his camp in any one full swoop. We've heard from a couple of these members on the floor and during our conversations in the hallways, like Chip Roy of Texas, and to a degree Ralph Norman of South Carolina, who've articulated these concerns about process, about times that bills are made available before they go to a vote, positions on pivotal committees that have their fingerprints on more of the legislation that goes through the House, or a parliamentarian, or, for lack of a better phrase, bureaucratic concerns. The concerns from people like Matt Gaetz of Florida are downright visceral. Like there is a personal level concern between Gaetz and Kevin McCarthy. And when I heard Bob Good of Charlottesville, Virginia, on the floor tonight, and we spoke with him yesterday in the House Speaker's lobby, he's speaking more of we need a fundamental change of leadership. We can't have anybody with ties to previous leadership in our new leadership, saying his constituents are demanding that. So that means Kevin McCarthy, no matter what he offers, is not an acceptable candidate because he's been in leadership. And that's where the math gets particularly complicated for Kevin McCarthy. He can't just do a thing or a series of things and get 16 people, which means this is a multi-round fight still to come. And even if he lures some back with a deal, he risks not getting everybody and then having to fight a different battle in a new way with a new calculus at risk of losing other members of his alliance along the way.
A multi-round fight that has already seen multiple rounds already. Scott McFarlane on Capitol Hill. Scott, thanks so much. We will be in touch, I'm sure. Thank you, Scott.
Thank you.
Let's turn now to Congressman Don Bacon, Republican from Nebraska, joining me now. Congressman, welcome. Thanks very much for joining us. What's the very latest that you're hearing? Thank you, Congressman. We know that discussions have been taking place. What is it that you know about those talks?
Well, it's secondhand information because I'm not in the inner room, but my good sources say that we have about half of the way done at this point, that about half the holdouts have agreed. Now, I'm not sure when they're going to officially come on board. I know they're working those details, but I think we've made a sizable step in today's negotiations, and I don't think that we're over the hump to get to 218, but it sounds like a lot of distance has been covered and a lot of progress today. But I got to just reiterate, these 20 folks have embarrassed our party. I think they've embarrassed the House. They've embarrassed our country. I think there's authoritarian regimes all over the world saying, see, we told you democracy does not work. And they're pointing at these 20 individuals. And I'm embarrassed about what they have done. And they could never get to yes. They've been offered every concession, and they can never get to yes. I think they're largely a group that can only vote no, and they're used to being in the minority party. We have to be the party that knows how to govern.
So, Congressman, you say about half of those 20 holdouts, so 10 out of those 20, you believe may actually be on board now with the deal. What is it still that the other 10 want?
Well, we think there's a few more that are within reach. But I do think there's a hardcore 5 or 6, maybe 7, we don't know right now, that are sort of like no under any circumstance. And some of these same individuals say they're absolutely no against Steve Scalise as well. And again, they've been offered every concession, and they just don't know how to get to yes. And some of these individuals call themselves nihilists. They're the type folks that say, hey, we don't mind if the house burns down. It's a real shame. We need people that know how to govern, that know how to find consensus, that know how to be part of a team. They're not there. But I got to point out, what we're going to see over the next few days with a smaller number left over, they're going to be hearing about the derailed conservative agenda. We're going to be passing no legislation that takes on inflation, the border security, supporting law enforcement, energy independence. That's all on hold. None of the committees are going to be filled. A lot of these committee staffers are going to get their pay taken away and their health insurance. And they're going to be hearing from their constituents that this is wrong. Because America, 95% of Americans know this is wrong what they're doing, that they're hurting America. It's about their own egos and their own, trying to drive up their own names and coverage.
Congressman, what does this suggest about the next 2 years for the Republican majority in the House? That you've now had 11 rounds of voting. You still have about half of this group of 20 that is still not on board with the deal at this point. What does that say about how the Republicans move forward in the House?
Well, I'm discouraged, to be honest with you, because I think smart people, you make your best case, you nominate someone, you debate, but then when you have someone gets 85% of the vote, you should coalesce around that leader. I believe, Elaine, that this is a fight for the soul of our party. Are we gonna be the party that are conservatives, but we want to govern and move things forward? Are we going to be the party that wants to just disrupt everything and have the attitude of let's burn down the house? I want to be a conservative that governs and moves the greatest country in the world forward on key issues facing us. I don't want to. And right now, we're derailed because of a very small group.
Congressman, some people watching this may say, was some of this foreseeable? Of course, hindsight is 20/20. But given the enormous gaps that we have seen leading up to this point, just within the Republican Party, is that perhaps something that is now, something that folks are reflecting on? That what we're seeing happen right now was, in some sense, foreseeable?
I think it was possible because we knew that there was, for like the last 2 months, there was a group of folks putting in demands. But they were getting their demands met. So I knew this was possible. I did not think it was likely because I love my country. I love the party of Lincoln and what we stand for. And I just thought smart, good, well-intended people would eventually coalesce around a team. Teams aren't perfect. No team is perfect. But you got to coalesce and work together. Teams that fail are those that you have 4 or 5 people who think they're too good for the team, that they know better than the team, and they break off. I'm personally going to do my very best to ensure that 10% cannot control the entire 222 Republican conference, let alone the entire 435 members of Congress. We got to be better than that. We cannot kowtow to 10%. And they're actually trying to put rules in that gives them favoritism with chairmanships, committee assignments. It's like an apartheid that they're looking for. They want to be at the top 10% with more power than the remaining 90%. That is unacceptable.
Congressman, what are some of the practical effects of this stalemate right now? For instance, how are your constituents affected by the fact that there is this gridlock? How are you affected with respect to the kind of briefings that you can receive?
Elaine, that's just a fantastic question. I'll give you 2 examples. I talked about a week ago or 2 weeks ago, somewhere in there, I was very concerned that we're not doing enough to counter China. They can build ships at 20-1 compared to America right now, and they're building up their forces at a much faster rate than we're responding. And we know this is a threat. We're not doing enough. And I shared that publicly. So General Milley, the chairman of the Joint Chiefs, wanted to talk to me, and also Mike Gallagher, because he had a separate article by coincidence. He wanted to meet with us, too, and lay out a secret briefing what they're trying to do in the Pacific and the Far East. But he had to cancel it because he says your clearances were pulled because you're members-elect, you're not an official member. So we couldn't even get a briefing from the chairman of the Joint Chiefs. And I'm on the Armed Services Committee, so this is very important. Secondly, many of the agencies cannot interact with this right now. So when our constituents call and they say, hey, Don Bacon, my tax returns have been locked up in the IRS for over a year. Can you help me get back my return, and we got hundreds of these every week and month. I'm serious. It's terrible how much the backlog is. The IRS today says they will not talk to us until we're official members. So we get constituent services every day on tax returns. I would say, issues with the VA. We have problems with visas, problems with passports. And our job is to help break that or get through the bureaucracy and help out our constituents. Well, as of the last now 3 days, we're not allowed to help out our constituents. And this is a big deal for every member of Congress.
How does that work, Congressman? I mean, on the ground, let's say one of your constituents wants to call your office because they're in desperate need of urgent help. What happens?
The best we can do is, like, say this person today says, I need help with my taxes. They've been locked up in the IRS for over a year. The best I can do is give them the phone number to the IRS. But then they have to be on hold for hours and hours and hours. When we work it, we have a hotline, and I can get immediate results when someone comes to our office seeking help. But this isn't true just for taxes. It's disabilities and travel and immigration for visas. And I help out. I get hundreds of requests every week for constituency help, and now I got to put them all on hold. So this does not serve America at all. And I hold the 20 members of Congress that are doing this responsible.
What would you say, though, to those holdouts who continue to believe that they are doing what they were elected by their own constituents to do, that carrying out this kind of continued opposition is precisely, they believe, why they were elected to Congress?
Well, we've asked them, what more do you want? And most of them say, you can't, some of them are honest, you can't give me anything. I'll never vote for Kevin. But they also say they won't vote for Steve Scalise. They're essentially obstructionists. They're demanding a Freedom Caucus person be the speaker. That's not going to happen. They're demanding Freedom Caucus folks be chairman of committees. We're a merit-based party. You got to earn it. You got to work for it. They want it handed to them in order for someone to get votes for speaker. It is wrong. I'd like to say it's like an affirmative action program for the Freedom Caucus. That's what they're asking, and it's not right.
And for those people who are adamantly against Kevin McCarthy, it sounds like personally, what is that about, Congressman, you think?
It varies. I think for most of these folks will be, I think we can get to eventually. But there's a handful that they say it's not personal, but it is personal. Because you can't offer them anything to get to yes at this point, so it appears. And I think they have a range of complaints, but I think some just want to have a scalp, if you will. They want to show that they have clout. And in this Congress, it takes 5 people to throw sand in all the gears. But I want them to be Americans first. We talk about America first. We should be Americans first. This does not serve Americans well from coast to coast in Alaska and Hawaii. So I hope they come to their senses. I think over the days and maybe weeks ahead, when there's a small handful holding out, their constituents are going to say enough is enough.
How long do you think this could go, Congressman?
I wish I could tell you. I don't have a crystal ball, and if I did, I'd make a lot in the stock market. I haven't done that too well in the last couple of years. But I'll share this with you. I was with a meeting of one of the caucuses, a caucus that I founded. I'm no longer the chairman of it. As of January 3rd, Dusty Johnson is now the chair for the Main Street Republican caucus. We have roughly 80 members. And today we had them in there, and the chairman of our caucus goes, if anyone here is thinking about quitting halfway with Kevin, go ahead and just leave right now. And we're not going to hold it against you, but I just want to talk to the people who are committed to go to the very end and not be held hostage by this 10%. Not a single person left. They all were committed to going all the way to the end. We'll go days, we'll go weeks, we'll go months, because you can't allow a few disgruntled troublemakers hold the entire House hostage and get their demands.
It's a situation we haven't seen in our modern American political history. Congressman Don Bacon, you've been very generous with your time. Thanks so much, Congressman.
I appreciate you.
Well, the House is adjourned until noon Friday. After 11 rounds of votes over the past 3 days, there is still no Speaker of the House. We're going to take a quick break. We'll be back with more from Capitol Hill. You're streaming CBS News Primetime.
Go to the ends of the earth.
Right now.
We got something crazy.
And reach for the stars.
Here we are.
Time.
Yes, it's my comeback.
Hey, this is pretty fun.
But wait, there's more.
Experience thought-provoking,
Welcome to the idea of being a human being.
innovative, and truly original reporting.
Look through a telescope and go, wow.
Because there's always something new under the sun on CBS Sunday morning.
When weather turns extreme,
The threat of severe weather and dangerous tornadoes is expected to last.
CBS News and the Weather Channel bring you virtual weather technology so advanced, so real.
Let's bring in our partners at the Weather Channel. Now 6 feet of water, imagine that. Cars that can act like battery lamps.
These hyper-realistic simulations show you what the weather will look and feel like before it happens.
Feel the forecast, streaming on CBS News.
Bombing, 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 she told us.
It sounded like 10 trains on a track coming towards you full speed.
We told them we're coming. We're coming.
What led us to where we are today?
They were coming to find you.
Ukraine. Breadbasket of the world, now breadlines.
California is burning.
These fires get so large that there aren't enough firefighters, airplanes, helicopters.
There's this real issue of hunger. We don't want to talk about food. When you say you have to reach out to the Taliban and talk to them, how does that work as a woman? I am not a traitor.
You knew it was stamped top secret. You knew what that meant.
Are you ready for some tough questions?
Okay, that's enough. Thanks.
I've got a lot of questions I didn't ask.
You will go to college for free!
I don't feel a day older than I was yesterday.
Our lives will be forever changed, but believe me, this too shall pass.
Okay, let's go.
The Emmy Award-winning 60 Minutes Sundays on CBS and streaming on Paramount Plus.
An original documentary from CBS reports. As the nation of Hungary evolves toward autocracy,
If you define an autocrat as someone that the people can no longer get rid of, even when there are elections, he's definitely an autocrat.
some American conservatives like what they see.
Viktor Orban has done a tremendous job, and you've kept your country safe.
CBS Reports explores their growing alliance.
I have come to Texas. We should unite our forces.
So there are a ton of booths here, a lot of young people here.
And what it means for American democracy.
Prime Minister Orban is being accused of all kinds of things simply because he doesn't toe that liberal line. He stands for Christian conservative values.
To sum up, the mother is a woman, the father is a man, and leave our kids alone. Full stop, end of discussion.
A new conservative alliance, now streaming on the free CBS News app. An original CBS Reports documentary.
I asked my students, what are we going to do about racism in the United States?
The backlash over teaching about racism in American schools.
I don't think it has any place in the classroom.
We can either pretend and say, no, we're not racist and we're all great people, or we can actually start to do the really, really hard work of addressing it.
How did you lose your job? I made the statement that white privilege is a fact.
Is it helping diversity and inclusion?
When you bring in different people's stories and experience, it enriches education.
If you don't talk about something, it doesn't go away.
Or driving us further apart?
What schools are doing to our children in the name of anti-racism is in fact teaching them racism.
The intention is to put us in this war against each other.
An original CBS Reports documentary, streaming now.
When weather turns extreme,
States from the plains to the northeast are bracing for more than 2 feet of heavy snow.
every second counts.
This is a monster winter storm.
CBS News and the Weather Channel bring you virtual weather technology so advanced, so real.
There's a wrinkle in the forecast, the accumulating ice.
You'll have time to get prepared.
Take precautions before you head out.
Feel the forecast on the CBS Evening News with Nora O'Donnell.
Welcome back. I'm Elaine Quijano. The House is adjourned until noon Friday. After 3 days of voting, there is still no Speaker of the House. Kevin McCarthy has failed to gain enough votes to become Speaker for the 11th time. Just like the last 10, Democrat Hakeem Jeffries ended Thursday with 212 votes, the entirety of the Democratic caucus. McCarthy has 200 votes. The majority of the GOP has continuously failed to get a faction of about 20 Republicans to support him. CBS News Chief White House correspondent Nancy Cordes joins me now for more. So, Nancy, last month alone, border officials reported 233,000 migrant encounters. Does the president view this plan as a long-term solution?
He says it's part of the solution, Elaine, and that it will make for a more orderly and safer bid to come to this country for thousands of people, expanding basically this program that until now had only applied to Venezuelans, to Cubans, to Haitians, to Nicaraguans, basically saying that they need to stay in their home countries and apply online for humanitarian parole and wait until they get a response rather than coming in person. And basically, the threat is